Hi, everyone.
We are Don't Mess with the Mommas.
MOMMAS with our motto.
You
You are the protagonist of your life, not the victim of your destiny.
Yes.
And today, who are you? I
forgot. I'm Carla.
And I forgot, I'm Arlaana, yeah. And today we're talking about something near and dear to our hearts, a world without greed. Could you imagine a world like that? So, but before we begin, we're starting something new. We're getting some feedback from Mommas, mommas.podcast@gmail.com. And Mabel of Syracuse loved It's the Heart, not the head. And she said she's gone out with many people in her life, many guys in her life, and they were very intellectual types, but they lacked heart, they lacked feelings. So, needless to say, she didn't marry any of them. Okay, she did marry somebody who was all heart. Okay, and you have a comment.
Okay, I have a comment from Christopher.
Where's he from?
He's from Ladson, South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Okay, and he said, if you're going to suffer, you might as well get something out of it. Honestly, one of the best paraphrased snippets of Poison into Medicine from Carla Brown that I've ever heard. Deeply encouraging episode. Humans forget about the vicissitudes of life, the natural ebb and flow, which is what the 8 winds are all about. You put my head in a better space today. Thank you.
Okay, so if we could put heads in better spaces one day at a time,
we've accomplished our mission.
Yeah, we've accomplished our mission because all we want to do is encourage. You know, so world without greed. Okay, so sorry to read a little bit, but there's something so much about this, right? So there's a concept to move from a world from extraction to contribution. So instead of measuring success on what you can take, success would be measured by what one adds to the community rather than what one extracts from it. This aligns with the idea of one is the mother of 10,000. That's a lot. Where a single selfless act has an infinite ripple effect. And could you imagine a world where your identity is not determined by how much money you have, how good looking you are, or how this or how that, everything external? So without greed, self-worth would be rooted in internal character and treasures of the heart rather than possessions or titles. There's a wonderful analogy, the chopstick analogy.
Right.
Yeah, do you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, is that okay?
Yeah,
All right.
I'll help along.
Okay. So there are 2 rooms, right? And one is considered heaven and one is considered hell. And they all have the same chopsticks. And there's tons of food on the table.
Same food.
Same food. It's really good food, like right, Japanese food, American food, everything.
Pastries.
Pastries are good. Even a little wine. But in one room, the room that's called hell, they were starving. And they couldn't eat anything, right? And there was all this food, and it was nothing. The other room, they were eating away, and they were getting a little chubby and having a great time. You know, so what was the difference? Same chopsticks. But the chopsticks were super long. In the place called hell, and sorry to use that term, but the place called hell, the chopsticks were so long they were trying to feed themselves, just thinking themselves. In heaven, they were using it to feed each other, right? So not that we have to become like communists or anything like that, you know, but to consider other human beings as extensions of ourselves, you know, gets rid of that greed, that deep suffering to want more and more, like an addict wanting more and more. And just one thing before I turn it over to you, because you're going to talk about the causes, where that comes from, all that greed. So the other thing is, a good friend of ours who's not a friend of ours, but he's our pharmacist, and we just consider him as a friend because he's such a good guy, and he's from Russia. And he was telling us back in the day, you know, people weren't paid according to their profession. So definitely we don't agree with this because, you know, you want motivation to go to all that schooling and stuff. But imagine a world where, you know, you get to choose whatever it is you're interested in, not because your parents say you're going to make this kind of money, not because you know you're going to make as much money and have as much influence as possible, but because you really want to do that profession. Whether it's a carpenter, which is to be amazing, people who know how to work with their hands and wood, whether it's a carpenter or a surgeon, that you get to choose without thinking about, the financial implications. Now that, again, there's a lot of problems with that, but that is a real sense of freedom in many ways. But so what are the causes? Why do humans have a sense of greed? We weren't born with that. Kids don't. Maybe they do because they want their toys, but then the parents teach the kids, share your toys. Well, you're not sharing your toys as you get older. That's for darn sure, right? But so what's the cause?
Well, it seems as though we are hardwired to fear loss, not having scarcity, and that comes from way back in ancient times when we did hunter-gatherers, and there was a struggle to survive. You had to have enough food, you had to have enough stuff to keep you warm, enough things to either keep you cool or hot, just a lack. So we're built for that fear. We're built with that fear is built into us. And it's unconscious. It's just unconscious. So we want to have more than enough. But then that can get into, excessive wanting. And then when we get things, there's a dopamine reaction, the neurotransmitter, the feel good. So we get what we desire and it makes us happy, but then that feeling leaves and then we feel empty and then we have to go for more. So anybody who's had a lot of privation, they tend to hold on, want more, have more, and it just becomes outrageous.
And what's interesting, and I love what you say about neurotransmitters, because when I taught psychology, the kids loved talking about neurotransmitters. They're so cool. And this dopamine is like an addict. You always want more. There's never enough. Living in the world of hunger, you never have enough. And even if you're wealthy, you still have that mentality, oh, if you're brought up in poverty, maybe I'll have a struggle, so I need to hoard as much as possible. And that's tremendous fear, people living in tremendous fear. And as a result of that fear, they, get mental problems, they just feel like I have to work harder and harder, I have to make more and more. And they just can't enjoy their lives. And they can't even step back to smell the roses, as we say, right? But the real dopamine rush is when you do for others, that stays. That dopamine lasts a whole lot longer because it's not based on the world of hunger. It's based on the world of gratitude, appreciation, and giving, right?
True.
And
go ahead. When you give and you help somebody and they flourish, it makes you want to have more of that feeling. You're looking to do more of that.
Absolutely, yes. But there's this concept of humanistic competition that Daisaku Ikeda, our international president, came up with. And could you imagine, like, we competing, if you have like a lot of wealth, who could do more for society? Like that becomes the competition. What a cool thing that would be, right? And again, we're not, saying give up what you have. Of course, make as much money as you want, do the things you want to do with your life, but think about your connection with other human beings and being able to really facilitate somebody else's happiness, as you just said, is so rewarding and more rewarding than all the money in the world. This Harvard University study that was done years ago, and it was about a 50-year study and looked at Harvard University graduates, mostly males. I think they were all males at that time. And when they were asked, what do you remember most about your life? What are you going to bring what is your legacy? I think 1% said my legacy is making all this money. Their legacy was the family and friends they built over the years, and that became precious, or the hobbies or things that they really enjoyed enjoyed, appreciating doing. So go ahead. What do you
Let's see.
think?
The other thing that came up was that we have a materialistic society, and this feeds into the greed and the hoarding, and you
Right.
have to comparing yourself to the next person, keeping up with the Joneses. We're constantly bombarded by advertising.
Yeah.
A bigger car, new stove, diamonds, buy, get, constantly being programmed to want more, and if you can't have more, then feeling depressed about it.
Right.
You just don't make the grade. So
Right. Yeah. And then, all those externals, like living in the external world and not really looking at your own life and how precious it is that you are the treasures. All the treasures of the universe, all the gold and silver are not going to, help you realize that you're the treasure. So this concept of win-win, which I know we had a conversation beforehand, and you talked about like people looked at you askance, when you talked about, yes, win-win. But that should be the way. Just let me read this. Win-win excellence. It's a mutual striving for excellence within a framework of cooperation. In this model, helping others succeed is viewed as the most effective way to ensure one's own success. And I know when my husband Chuck is at the camera. Thank you, Chuck. Hi, Chuck. Zoe is upstairs right now because she definitely wants to jump on my lap all the time. I know when we were going through a difficult time, we were told that we had to create a win-win. It couldn't be our win over somebody else's loss.
That's right.
And as difficult as that was, because the person we were looking at, we were really struggling with, but creating a win-win scenario, that becomes victory for all.
Yeah, but people don't associate win-win,
Right.
Because we're not trained to think win-win. I was in a class and I asked this question to the student: why can't we all win together? That concept was foreign to them, and they were horrified. What do you mean? Like I'm going to take something away from them.
Right.
But no, if I win in some aspect of my life, that means that you can do it too.
Absolutely.
You can replicate it. It's
Absolutely.
going to become part of the cosmos, the connection that we have, because we're all connected one way or the other. We all influence each other one way or another. So that idea of winning together, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Yes.
And you can be happy in somebody winning. You can find joy in that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Especially if you've helped them in some way to win. Maybe you just sat with them when they were going through a hard time, and that helped them to push through. They always remember you for that, and you always have that. That's the treasure of the heart.
And the wonderful thing about Treasure of the Heart, it's free. You don't have to pay money for it, but it's something that stays with you as a treasure for your life, And, if you really respect your own life, then you can care about others. But if you care nothing about your life and you look at your life as just like a moneymaker and a grabber or this and that to try to fill up whatever is inside your life, you'll never fill up. If you've got a hole in your life, it can't be filled with externals. It has to be filled from the inside out. And that's why we call it the treasures of the heart, which is so important. So of course, there are many ways in which to move from a society that's based on greed to a society of happiness. And I know you're going to just briefly mention the three components. But before that, when you look at the happiest countries, shouldn't we, with all this material fortune, which not everybody has, obviously, shouldn't we be the happiest country by definition in the world? And yet places like Finland and Denmark and Sweden and Iceland, they're considered the happiest. And I remember watching something on 60 Minutes, and a very, very wealthy drug manufacturer talked about in society, they don't like to show off. It's considered that they're more humble. So driving like a fancy car, if you have a lot of money, that's not considered cool, And they're happy. They're happy. They're not competing. And I had an exchange student from Denmark years ago teaching in the high school that I was teaching. And she said that they pay a lot of taxes, but nobody complains because you see how the taxes are being used to keep the streets clean, for health care, for schooling, so they don't complain about it at all. And it's not like I have to compete against this person, because if that's your nature, you isolate yourself in so many ways because you think you're better than someone, or if you don't have, then you're worse than someone. And you can't really create genuine friendships because you're always looking over your shoulder. Why are they my friends? Do they have a hidden agenda? And that's not the way to live. That's not the way we're supposed to live. That's not the way it means. That's not what it means to be human. But go ahead, moving in that direction. And it's going to take a lot of work. But if we created a materialistic society, we can also create a society based on respect
Opposite.
for. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that's where education comes in.
Right. For sure.
What kind of education are we getting?
Empathy, right?
Empathy was
Learning
one of the
empathy.
things. Our society has role models of accumulation. So
Yes.
to do that, to reverse that, we need to work on the individual level.
Right.
Do I really need to buy this? What value is it adding to my life? Who made it? What are the conditions that they're living on to give me this product? If it's not going to be good for them, then you don't need to be doing it to make them suffer because you want that product.
Right.
So then there's the cultural and the society level. What the society is pushing. So we could start with learning empathy for others, and then the other thing is the economic level. What's good for everybody. Everybody needs health care. Everybody needs housing. Everybody needs food. Because when we don't have these things, then it becomes inequality in society. And that becomes a problem. President Cater says, there's enough for everybody, but not enough for everybody's greed. There's enough for everybody. What we lack is the ability to know how to share. We have to work that out.
And parents teach kids, you must share. What happens as they get older? That's what they're teaching their kids. So the kids are looking at the parents. Wait a minute, didn't you teach me how to share? Now, it doesn't mean you should give your stuff away. No, absolutely not. That doesn't even begin to make sense. But that concept of really, understanding how we're all interconnected,
Right.
and harming one is harming, the other, or harming oneself.
Yes.
So, it's a wonderful, wonderful idea that we could gradually move toward, because, if it turned out that the wealthiest people were the happiest people on earth, then go for it. But they're not. What's being, all these studies that are going on now is finding that, at a certain point, people, who have a lot of money, they're just not experienced joy in their life, And especially, I have to say, young people who get a lot of money up front, what happens after that? They've already achieved everything. What do they do, right?
Yeah.
And now people are thinking, as wealthy people want to live longest. Life is eternal. You get to have lives after life after
You
life.
get rid of this body, you get a new body that works.
Yeah, I mean,
okay?
I'm like already putting in for long black hair and maybe hazel eyes or
I
whatever.
want to be at least 5'7".
Yeah.
Because I'm short, and the pants. Trying to buy pants that don't drag to the ground is ridiculous. I'm tired of that. So, but I wanted to add this thing about Adam Smith and the wealth of nations.
Of course, yes.
When you see these talk shows on Sunday, talk about the economy, they always bring up Adam Smith. But I never knew that they never said this, okay? But he had a theory of moral sentiments about the necessity of empathy, fairness, and self-restraint for a functioning society. And what we have now is a society that is not functioning. The three fates. I love the three fates, okay? I went to college to learn these three fates. They're three women. Sometimes they look like hags, but the ones that I know were beautiful. They were young and they were happy and they were dancing. So one is giving. The second one represents receiving. And the third means to keep the circle going. giving, receiving, that doesn't break. So there's a back and forth, a sharing, a benefit to each other. And what we have is everything is going up and nothing is coming back. So, but it starts on the individual level. You change yourself, the way you're thinking, and you do something different.
We call that human
revolution.
revolution. Human revolution. You can't have a revolution outside, and change anything. You got to deal with you. You're the one that has to evolve, and revolve.
Right.
So,
and human revolution is really very simple. President Cater says it's doing this instead of that.
yeah, and
So
change the recording in the brain, right? If you're recording one thing, putting a new,
Yeah.
we used to call it tape, but now putting a new whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So to end,
Yes.
I think that's everything, right? Okay, so this is encouragement that we always like to end with encouraging words. Material possessions cannot be enjoyed after death. But millionaires rich in life force are able to freely make use of the treasures of the universe in lifetime after lifetime and enjoy a journey of eternal happiness. That is what constitutes proof of true victory in life. And one more time, because it's so important to hear this. Material possessions cannot be enjoyed after death, but millionaires rich in life force are able to freely make use of the treasures of the universe in lifetime after lifetime and enjoy a journey of eternal happiness. That is what constitutes proof of true victory in life.
Yeah.
So with that, we would love to hear from you because we want to give you shout outs. So we love giving shout outs. So Mommas, mommas.podcast@gmail.com.
Yeah.
And we are who?
We are Don't Mess with the Mommas.
We don't mess with the Mommas, MOMMAS with
And
our
our motto is,
you are the protagonist of your life, not the victim of your destiny. You can hear us on all platforms at this point, and listen to us on all platforms as well if you'd like to take a look and see what you see.
Right. To have fortune, really to have fortune. That's fortune.
Yeah.
Lifetime after lifetime.
Right. Yep. Bye. Take
Bye-bye.
care of your
Bye-bye.
precious selves. Regard yourselves as the true treasures.
Wonderful.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.